For me, it's hard to believe that the 2022 quarterback class is now going to be on year 4. While none of the top guys in the 2022 class made the jump to the NFL this spring, there are a couple of them who will probably go high in next year's draft, and so far, a lot of them have also transferred to new schools. In today's video, we're going to do exactly what the title says. We're going to go through the top 15 quarterback recruits in the class of 2022 and take a look at where they are just over 3 years later. Some of them will surprise you, and some of them are directly on par with where they were projected to be. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about the 2022 quarterback class. Okay, I lied. We're actually going to talk about 18 guys because there were 18 four-star quarterbacks in the class of 2022, and that first one was Zack Pyron. He was obviously a 4-star recruit in the class of 2022, and he came out of Pinson Valley High School. He ended up putting up decent numbers, but would decide to sign with Georgia Tech. Pyron was one of the higher-ranked quarterbacks to go to Georgia Tech in recent memory, but didn't really do anything. In his best season in 2022, he had about 565 yards and 3 touchdowns, but this past year he did have 4 scores on the ground. Pyron was a situational backup behind Haynes King, and with Haynes coming back for the 2025 season, he saw the writing on the wall. Pyron would decide to transfer over to Minnesota, but for some unknown or odd reason, he would actually pull away from the Golden Gophers and has since signed with South Alabama. South Alabama lost their quarterback Gio Lopez to North Carolina, so I guess it makes sense, and Pyron will hope to go down south and save his starting career. So far, we're 0 for 1 on guys who have hit. One thing that sort of makes me feel old is I remember when Justin Martin committed to UCLA. This guy was a 4-star recruit coming out of Inglewood High School in Inglewood, California, and at 6'4" and a rocket of an arm, he was always a developmental type quarterback who could maybe blow up eventually while he was at UCLA. He ended up passing for 2,100 yards and 41 touchdowns his final season, but ultimately at UCLA, I believe he would start just 1 game. That would come in 2024, and it was on the road against Penn State. In total, Martin had 179 yards and 1 touchdown in his entire UCLA career, and after 3 seasons there, he has done nothing. Martin decided to enter the transfer portal and is now headed over to Maryland, where he will replace Billy Edwards Jr., and Martin is the projected starter, and honestly, someone I am really excited to watch. I think he's one of those names that could come out of nowhere this year, and again, this guy has a lot of physical potential, so I'm excited to see if he can put it all together, but for now, we are 0 for 2. The third guy we're going to talk about is the number 16 quarterback in the class, and that was Jakuri Brown. Coming out of Valdosta, Georgia, Jakuri was a 4-star and ended up putting up decent numbers while he was there, as he ended up throwing for over 1,500 yards and running for over 1,000 yards in both his junior and senior season. He was definitely considered one of the better dual-threat quarterbacks in the country and decided to commit to Miami. Jakuri Brown ended up being behind Tyler Van Dyke in 2022 and actually got an opportunity to play. He threw for about 230 yards with 3 touchdowns and 3 picks, but then he never got on the field in 2023 and transferred to UCF. Brown in garbage duty this year threw for 400 yards but had 1 touchdown compared to 4 interceptions. Sure, he was decent on the ground, but the guy just cannot throw for his life, and he hasn't gotten much of an opportunity. I believe he's back in 2025 with Scott Frost, but Taven Jackson will come in from Indiana, and I believe he will be the starter. We're now 0 for 3. At number 15, we have quarterback Sam Horn. Coming out of Collins Hill, Georgia, Sam Horn was one of the top high school quarterbacks in his class as he put up ridiculous numbers while he was there. He ended up winning 27 games in his final 2 seasons, and he passed for 8,000 yards and 78 touchdowns in his last 2 years. At one point, he was considered a borderline 5-star recruit, but he'd fall to number 15 in the country, I guess. He decided to sign on with Mizzou, and as a true freshman, he became the backup to Brady Cook. Ultimately, he has barely gotten on the field the last couple of seasons, and 1, that is due to Brady Cook being the starter, and 2, he has battled an injury. Horn plays both football and baseball, and ended up having to have Tommy John. He's done nothing in his first 3 years on campus so far, but apparently he's knee-deep in a quarterback battle with Bo Pribula from Penn State, and those two are battling it out for the starting quarterback job, so the jury is still out on Horn, but for now, we gotta say we are 0 for 4, and Sam Horn has also been a bust. Unfortunately, guys, things are not going to get any better, as at number 14 we need to talk about Garrett Garner. He ended up going to Benedictine Military School, which is located in Savannah, Georgia, And fun fact, his backup quarterback was Luke Kromenhoek, who eventually became a near 5-star, and he was part of the class of 2024. But I'm getting sidetracked here. Garner ended up having decent numbers while he was in high school, as he threw for 7,100 yards and 71 touchdowns, and the 4-star quarterback would decide to sign with Auburn. Unfortunately, he never got an opportunity while he was on the Plains, as in his 3 years, he had no touchdowns and 1 interception. Despite all the dysfunction at the quarterback spot the last couple of years, Garner never saw the field, which was kind of concerning to be honest. He decided to enter the 2025 transfer portal and has since found a new home at Texas State. I have no clue if he's going to be the starter or not, but GJ Kinney is one of the top young coaches in college football, and if he starts, I expect Garner to have a good season. But guys, we are now 0 for 5 on players hitting, and we're about to be 0 for 6. That next guy is AJ Duffy, who is the number 13 quarterback in the class of 2022, and he came out of IMG Academy. At first, he was actually at Rancho Verde High School in California, and ended up actually being really solid. All 4 years he was a starter, but unfortunately things would not work out when he got to the college level. That year at IMG didn't really do him any good, as Duffy would end up arriving at Florida State, where he did nothing in his first 2 seasons. I guess technically he threw for a touchdown. He would then decide to transfer to San Diego State this past season, where he did not play in a single game because Danny O'Neal was the guy. I believe Duffy is back in 2025 for the Aztecs, and hopefully he'll get an opportunity to start or at least be a backup, as O'Neal ended up leaving for Wisconsin. We are now 0 for 6, and at number 12, we finally get our first player who's actually done something. That guy is going to be Taven Jackson, as coming out of Center Grove High School, located on the south side of Indianapolis, Taven put up really good numbers. He's also the brother of NBA player Trace Jackson Davis, but going back in time, he ended up blowing up in his last 2 seasons, as he ended up throwing for 4,813 yards and had 47 touchdowns during his prep career. The 4-star recruit had offers from everywhere in the country, but ultimately would decide to sign with Tennessee. He became one of the first quarterbacks to sign with Josh Heupel, and in his freshman season he threw for 37 yards. He decided to enter the 2023 transfer portal and would decide to head back home to Bloomington, where he'd reunite with his brother and play for the Hoosiers. He would replace Connor Bazelak as the starter, and Taven threw for 914 yards with 2 touchdowns and 5 picks. Unfortunately, Brendan Sorsby would then beat him out by the end of the season, but Taven would become a backup and would actually become somewhat important for them this year. Both Curtis Rourke and Kurt Cignetti came in 2024, but when the Hoosiers were undefeated and on game day, Taven took over as a starter for the hurt Rourke and ended up leading them to victory. This past season as a backup, Taven threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. He has since transferred to UCF, where he's likely going to be the starting quarterback for Scott Frost. I guess technically he hasn't done a whole lot, but he has at least started a season. The other guys on the list can't say that, so for now we're going to say we are 1 for 7. At number 11, we had a quarterback who blew up at the end of the 2022 cycle, and that was Katin Hauser. Coming out of St. John Bosco High School, he was the quarterback after DJU, and Hauser would end up deciding to sign with Boise State. As I said though, he'd have a good senior season, and would decide to flip to Michigan State. He was bumped up to a 4-star, but that really didn't mean a whole lot. He ended up becoming the backup to Peyton Thorne in 2022, before switching roles in 2023, and actually throwing for 1,000 yards with 6 touchdowns and 5 picks. Hauser would then transfer to East Carolina for the 2024 season, and would take over for Jake Garcia, throwing for over 2,000 yards with 18 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. Hauser's actually been somewhat decent in his college career so far, and it looks like he's going to be the guy for ECU in 2025, and hopefully he'll blow up into one of the better players at the Group of 5 level. The jury is still out, but I'm going to say we have now had our second player who's done decent. At number 10, we have one of the most disappointing stories in the 2022 class, and that is going to be quarterback Brady Allen. I'm a guy who's from Indiana, so I support all the athletes that come out of the state of Indiana, and Brady Allen was next up. He ended up going to Gibson Southern High School, which is located near Evansville, and ended up having nearly 12,000 yards. His 149 touchdowns is one of the best in Indiana high school football history, and he still is second all-time in the state of Indiana for passing yards. Honestly, it was perfect for him to become a 4-star recruit and go over to Purdue, as Jeff Brom was the perfect coach for him. He arrived in West Lafayette in 2022, but was the backup to Aiden O'Connell. When Brom left for Louisville in 2023, he took Brady Allen with him, but honestly, I think Brom has kind of screwed over Brady Allen. He keeps bringing in these 1-year rental transfer quarterbacks, and Allen has been left in the dust. He played 1 snap in 2023 and did not see the field in 2024, and after testing the waters in this year's portal, he has since decided to come back to Louisville, meaning he's just a backup. but Brom already has Miller Moss in the works for this season, so it looks like Brady Allen will spend his 4th straight season on the bench, and this guy's talent was completely wasted, and it's honestly a little bit upsetting. Sadly, we get another player who's been a dud. We're now halfway through the video, so take a quick moment to leave a like and let me know which topic or type video I should do next. So Malik Murphy was the number 9 quarterback in the class of 2022, and he came out of Junipero Serra High School, which is located in California. Murphy had a rocket for an arm, and at nearly 6'5", he had a lot of potential. He ended up putting up really good numbers while he was in high school, throwing for 2,900 yards and 22 touchdowns in his final season. He would decide to sign with Texas, but after just being a backup to Quinn Ewers in 2023, he would transfer to Duke for 2024. This past season with the Blue Devils, Murphy led them to a 9-win season, and he had 2,900 yards with 26 touchdowns and 12 picks. He had some questionable decision making, which I guess is why Duke decided to move on, and if anyone can't be picky about quarterbacks, I feel like it's Duke, but Murphy was left in the dust, and they went and grabbed Darian Mensah from Tulane. Murphy had a bit of a saga in terms of where he was going to transfer next, but ultimately he has ended up at Oregon State, where he'll take over for starting quarterback Ben Gulbranson. Murphy so far has actually had a good career. Murphy so far has actually lived up to the hype, and I do hope he has a really good year for the Beavers this fall. At number 8, we had a quarterback who blew up near the end of the 2022 cycle, and that was quarterback Nick Evers. Coming out of Flower Mound High School in Texas, Evers became one of the best players in the country, throwing for 5,000 yards and over 60 touchdowns in his last 2 years of football. He was a 3-star recruit who was committed to Florida, but would eventually blow up into a 4-star and commit to the Oklahoma Sooners. Evers would arrive in Norman in 2022, but would not really get an opportunity to play at all. In fact, he had just 1 pass. He sort of become one of those players who's epitomized the new transfer portal rules, as he would transfer to Wisconsin for the 2023 season, but would end up sitting on the bench the entire year. After not playing in Madison, he would transfer to UConn for the 2024 season, and actually got an opportunity to get on the field. Evers threw for about 900 yards with 5 touchdowns and 5 picks, and it looks like for now Nick is the future of the Huskies program, and is still a little bit of a work in progress, but it has been a bust in my eyes. At number 7, we have a quarterback who went to a top-tier program, and that was Gunnar Stockton. Coming out of Raven County High School in Tiger, Georgia, Stockton would play at a little bit of a lower level of high school football, but put up ridiculous numbers. As a sophomore, he threw for 3,500 yards and 43 touchdowns, and would continue putting up ridiculous numbers like that. In total, Stockton had nearly 14,000 yards and 177 touchdowns to go along with 77 touchdowns on the ground. Stockton was the number 7 quarterback in the country and decided to commit to Georgia. So far in his 3 years, Stockton's had a limited role. He was on the bench purely his first 2 seasons, but with Carson Beck getting hurt in the SEC championship game, he helped lead them to victory there, and then started their college football playoff game against Notre Dame. This past season, he threw for a total of 400 yards with 1 touchdown, and now Stockton has the inside track to being the starter this year, and has high expectations. I'm not quite sure how good he's going to be, but there's still an asterisk on this guy as he hasn't gotten a real opportunity, but based on numbers alone, he has been a bust. As we now get to the number 6 quarterback in the class, we need to talk about Walker Howard. Coming out of St. Thomas More High School in Lafayette, Louisiana, Howard was a fast riser in the class of 2022, and on some sites was a 5-star. His dad was an infamous LSU quarterback, so like father like son, Walker put up ridiculous numbers while he was in high school and committed to go to LSU. Unfortunately, Walker would not see the field at all in 2022 as he was stuck behind Jaden Daniels and would transfer to Ole Miss for the 2023 season. He'd passed for a total of 56 yards and was stuck behind Jackson Dart, and then in 2024 he was once again stuck behind Dart and got passed up by Austin Simmons. In his 3 years so far, Howard has less than 70 yards passing and has done nothing. He decided to transfer back home to Lafayette, as he will now take over for Ben Wooldridge at Louisiana, and hopefully Walker can save his career in his last 2 seasons and put up good numbers for the hometown team. Honestly, I've always thought the 2022 quarterback class was very interesting, and no one could really figure out who the top guy was, as On 3 actually had Devin Brown as their number 1 player, but he was number 5 on 24/7 Sports. He ended up playing at 2 high schools and finished his career at Corner Canyon High School in Utah, and in total, Devin Brown had nearly 8,000 yards and 85 touchdowns during his high school career. He ended up blowing up from a 3-star to a 4-star and flipped from USC to Ohio State. Unfortunately, Devin would never be able to get anything going at Ohio State, as they obviously had Kyle McCord and Will Howard. Devin Brown's best season came in 2023 with 2 touchdowns, but he got hurt in their Cotton Bowl game against Mizzou. That was sort of his opportunity. In total, he only had about 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and has since decided to transfer to Cal, where he'll battle it out with JKS for the starting job. Ultimately, I think Devin's probably going to win that job, but it is absolutely dysfunctional in Cal right now, and I don't expect them to do anything this year. And for now, Devin Brown has been a bust, but hopefully he can save his career with the Golden Bears. Another top-end guy who signed with a top-end program was Tai Simpson. For a long time, Tai Simpson was the top guy in his high school class, but ultimately fell to number 4. He ended up passing for 2,800 yards and 41 touchdowns his senior year, and became the top quarterback in his class, and decided to choose Bama over Clemson, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. Unfortunately, Simpson has played 3 years at Bama, but has yet to have scored a touchdown. He played a little bit in 2023 against USF, but for the most part has been a bench warmer, as Jalen Milroe was there. He's now in a quarterback battle with Austin Mack and Keelan Russell, and it seems like Ty will likely be the starter this fall, but he still is super inexperienced, and to this point has been a bust. At number 3, we need to talk about Connor Weman. Weman was a 5-star recruit coming out of Bridgeland High School, and this guy absolutely blew up his final season. He had over 51 touchdowns in his high school career, and the 5-star recruit would decide to sign with Texas A&M. Weman would actually play the last 4 games of his freshman season, throwing for just over 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. He looked super solid and would play the first couple games in 2023 before getting hurt. He had about 1,000 yards and 8 scores again. He took over as the starter in 2024, and some projected him as a first-round pick if he could stay healthy, but unfortunately, he could neither stay healthy or good. He was terrible when he was on the field, and in total had about 800 yards with 3 touchdowns and 5 picks, and was eventually benched in favor of Marcel Reed. Connor would enter the 2025 transfer portal and try to find a new home. He transferred to Willie Fritz in Houston, who were looking to replace quarterback Donovan Smith, so Weman will likely take over as the starter for Houston in 2025 and will hopefully save his career, but again, like a lot of players on this list, he's been very disappointing despite having a lot of potential. At number 2, we get to our first guy who was always projected to be a big-time player and honestly has lived up to the hype, and that is Kade Clubnick. Coming out of Westlake High School, Clubnick was an absolute winner, as he barely lost any games while he was in high school and actually outdueled Quinn Ewers. Kade blew up from your average 4-star to a 5-star recruit by the end of his high school career and would decide to sign with Clemson. He was the top guy on some sites, but ultimately finished at number 2 on 24/7's rankings. Clubnick would end up playing sparingly his freshman year, but would take over in the ACC Championship game. He became the full-fledged starter in 2023, and there were definitely some growing pains as he threw for 2,900 yards with 19 touchdowns. In 2024, Clemson had a weird year. They lost a couple of games, but Kade threw for 3,700 yards with 36 touchdowns and also ran for nearly 500 more and 7 scores, and they would end up making the ACC Championship game, beat SMU, and go to the playoff, where they had a semi-entertaining game against Texas in the first round. Clubnick is now a Heisman favorite for 2025 and could be one of the top quarterback prospects in the 26th draft, so he has definitely lived up to the hype, and his best football still may be to come. And last but not least, we need to talk about Drew Aller. He's another guy who absolutely blew up by the end of his high school career, as I remember him also being just a normal 4-star. He went to Medina High School in Ohio and ended up throwing for 4,444 yards and 48 touchdowns as a senior, and this capped off a tremendous career. He was the number 3 player in the country according to 24/7 Sports and would decide to sign with Penn State. His first year, he was the backup to Sean Clifford and ended up having 4 touchdowns. He took over as the starter in 2023, and while he had 2,600 yards and 25 touchdowns, many thought he was mentally soft and he disappeared in their biggest games. In 2024, he improved, having 3,300 yards and 24 scores, but his interception number went up. People still think mentally he just doesn't have what it takes, and while he did lead Penn State to a deep run in the college football playoff, he decided to come back instead of going to the draft. Scouts are in love with this guy as he's 6'5", has a great arm, and pretty much checks every box, but honestly, I think something is a little bit off with him. I want to see him put it all together in 2025, and maybe he will be the top quarterback prospect next year, but for now, he's been a superstar in college, but compared to the hype of him being a potential number 1 quarterback prospect, he's been a little bit underwhelming. So yeah, today we talked about the 2022 high school quarterback class, and honestly looking at all of them, there have not been many players that have actually been good. Drew Aller, Kade Clubnick, and Malik Murphy have really been the 3 guys that have done stuff, and then a couple of other players have seen the field or the jury is still out on, but for the most part, they have all been disappointing. But what do you guys think? If you're a fan of one of the players on this list, why haven't they worked out? Which year or position group should I do next? And before you go, don't forget to also leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.